Welcome to AfroPulse Stories, where modern African tales come alive. Don't just watch, be part of the journey. Hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Now lean in, today's story begins. Leah stood in the nursery, the soft hum of the baby mobile filling the quiet room. She adjusted the tiny folded onesies in the dresser for what felt like the 10th time that day. Yellow, green, pale blue, all perfectly rolled and ready. She'd been nesting for weeks now, and tonight, she wanted everything to be perfect. Because tonight, she told herself, would be different. James had promised he'd be home early. He'd said they'd order in from that Thai place she loved, the one with the mango sticky rice, and maybe even watch a movie. Just us, he'd said over breakfast that morning, flashing that boyish grin that had once been enough to melt her heart. She glanced at the clock. 8:14 p.m. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the dresser. He should have been home hours ago. Leah's phone sat face up on the bed, the screen stubbornly black. No call. No text. Not even the quick running late message that used to come like clockwork. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe traffic. Maybe he'd stopped to grab dessert. Maybe. But her stomach twisted anyway. That strange gnawing instinct that had been creeping in more and more these last few months. She brushed a hand over her rounded belly, the baby kicking softly as if sensing her unease. "It's okay, Peanut," she whispered, her voice steady but her chest tight. "Daddy's just late. He'll be home soon." Leah tried to distract herself. She turned on the TV in the living room, flipping aimlessly through channels, but not really seeing any of them. She scrolled through her phone, liking random posts on social media. She reheated the pad thai she'd ordered hours ago, because after the second unanswered call, she decided not to wait for him to eat. By 9:30, the food was cold again, and so was her patience. She dialed his number, straight to voicemail. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down, but her mind went into overdrive. Maybe his battery died, maybe he left his phone at work, maybe, always maybe. Leah tried to shake it off. James had been stressed with work. He'd been working late nights, taking calls she wasn't supposed to overhear, coming home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. But every time she brought it up, he'd laugh it off. "Babe, you're imagining things. Hormones, maybe? You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." She wanted to believe him. God, she needed to believe him. By 10 o'clock, belief felt like a thread ready to snap. Leah found herself standing in the hallway, keys in hand, shoes hastily slipped on. She didn't even remember making the decision to leave. It was just instinct now, a need to move, to find him, to quiet the roaring storm in her chest. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Too silent. She turned back to glance at the nursery. The soft glow of the nightlight bathed the room in a gentle warmth, the tiny crib waiting. She felt the sting of tears press against her eyes, but blinked them away. No, she wasn't going to cry. Not yet. The night air was cooler than she expected when she stepped outside, wrapping her in a chill that didn't match the heat of her anxiety. Her car started with a groan, and she sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Where to first? His office. Maybe he'd stayed late again, too focused to notice the time. She pulled out of the driveway, her heart pounding harder with every passing streetlight. The town felt eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath along with her. As she drove, her mind replayed the last few weeks in fragments. The late meetings. The unexplained charges on the credit card. The second phone bill she'd found and convinced herself was nothing. The way he'd been distant, distracted, even when he was sitting right next to her on the couch. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. At the office, the parking lot was nearly empty. His car wasn't there. Her chest tightened. Next, she drove to his friend Mark's place. James had mentioned stopping by there a couple of times in the last month. Maybe that's where he was. Maybe. But Mark's house was dark. No car in the driveway. No lights on. Leah sat in her car outside for a full minute, staring at the silent house as a hollow feeling began to spread in her chest. And then her gaze shifted to the far corner of her mind. The place she hadn't dared to look for months. The apartment downtown. The one he'd sworn he'd given up. The one they'd argued about until she'd finally believed him when he'd said, "Leah, I ended the lease. I don't even have the keys anymore." Her stomach twisted violently. She shouldn't go there. But her hand was already moving to put the car in gear. The drive downtown was a blur. Streetlights smeared into streaks of orange, and white as tears she hadn't realized were falling blurred her vision. She blinked hard, telling herself she was imagining things, that when she got there, the apartment would be empty, dark, lifeless. But as she pulled into the familiar parking lot, she saw it, his car, parked like it had never left. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world outside her windshield felt too sharp, too loud, too real. She turned off the engine and sat there in the quiet, her pulse roaring in her ears. Then, almost mechanically, she got out of the car. Her feet carried her forward on autopilot, across the lot, up the stairs she'd once climbed with him on lazy Sunday mornings, coffee in hand and laughter echoing. Each step now felt like a countdown. 1, 2, 3. The door loomed in front of her, familiar and foreign all at once. Her hands shook as she reached into her purse. The key was still there. Her heart thudded, so hard it hurt as the metal slipped into the lock. Click. She turned the knob. The door wasn't locked. Leah stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. Something in the air felt different, warmer, alive. And then she heard it, soft laughter, low voices, from somewhere down the hall. And in that moment, she knew, whatever she found behind that door, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Leah stood frozen in the doorway of that apartment building for a long moment, keys trembling in her hand. She could still turn back, pretend she never came, pretend she never saw his car parked there like some cruel monument to her fears. But her feet moved anyway. The hallway smelled the same, cheap carpet cleaner and faint cologne. Every step echoed like a warning she refused to hear. By the time she reached the door, her heart was slamming so hard she could taste metal in her mouth. The key slid into the lock like it had never been gone. Click. The door opened a fraction. Warm air and the faint scent of wine hit her. Her breath caught in her throat. "James," she called, barely above a whisper, as though she needed to hear herself say his name to make this real. Silence. And then laughter. Faint. From down the hall. The world blurred. She stepped inside. Her shoes barely made a sound on the polished hardwood as her eyes swept over the apartment. Nothing had changed. The same gray couch. The same coffee table. But now there were details she hadn't put there. 2 wine glasses on the counter, a red pair of heels kicked off by the couch, a silk scarf draped carelessly over the armrest. Her stomach twisted violently. "James," she said again, this time louder, her voice trembling. Still no answer. The laughter was louder now, followed by something else, music. A soft hum, something slow and sultry, drifting from the bedroom at the end of the hall. Every step toward that door felt like walking through wet cement, heavy and deliberate. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to turn around, to protect herself from whatever waited on the other side. But she kept going. Hands shaking, she reached for the bedroom doorknob. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. And then, she turned. The door creaked as it opened, just enough to let the scene inside flood her vision. For a second, Leah's brain refused to process what she was seeing. James. In their bed, the bed they'd picked out together, with someone else. A woman. Long dark hair spilled over the pillow. A flash of red silk sheets. The sharp contrast of tan skin against the white duvet. Leah stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught like a bird in a snare. James's head whipped around first, his eyes wide, his mouth forming words that didn't come out. Leah. The woman turned next. She wasn't some stranger off the street. She was beautiful, poised, the kind of beauty that hurt to look at. A red dress lay crumpled at the foot of the bed, discarded like an afterthought. Leah couldn't move, couldn't speak. The baby kicked hard, almost violently, as though reacting to her mother's heartbreak. Leah. James started again, scrambling out of bed, grabbing for his pants. This isn't what it looks like. Not what it looks like. The absurdity of the words slammed into her chest like a hammer. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She felt the room spinning, closing in, like the air had been sucked out of it. The woman in bed, Natalie, Leah would later learn, didn't look guilty. She didn't look surprised. She just looked annoyed. "Well," the woman said, arching an eyebrow, "I told you she'd find out eventually." That snapped Leah out of her frozen haze. "You," her voice cracked. "You knew? You knew he had a wife? That I'm—" Her hand instinctively went to her belly. The other woman sat up slowly, unbothered by the sheets slipping down, revealing more than Leah could stand to see. "Oh, please," Natalie said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're the victim here? He told me you two were over. That you were just," she smirked, "living together for the baby." Leah staggered back a step, bile rising in her throat. James was pleading now, his voice cracking, his words tumbling over each other. "Leah, please, just let me explain. It's not what you think." But she couldn't hear him. All she could hear was the pounding of her heart, the rush of blood in her ears, the sound of her entire world shattering in one sharp, deafening crack. Leah didn't remember running. One moment she was standing there in the doorway, her husband's voice chasing after her. The next she was in the hallway, her hands fumbling for her car keys, tears blinding her. Her breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. The baby kicked again, hard enough to make her double over for a moment. But she didn't stop. She just kept moving. James's voice followed her down the stairs, desperate, broken. "Leah, please. Just please wait." But she didn't wait. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking, so hard she could barely get the key into the ignition. Her mind spun with flashes, his late nights, the faint traces of perfume, the excuses that never quite made sense. How had she missed it? How had she been so blind? When the engine roared to life, she pressed the gas harder than she meant to, tearing out of the parking lot, the building shrinking in her rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. Hot tears blurred her vision, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. She tried to wipe them away, but they just kept coming, faster, heavier, until her chest ached with the effort of holding herself together. She didn't know where she was going. She just drove. Every streetlight, every stop sign, every stretch of road passed in a haze of grief and disbelief. Somewhere in the chaos of her thoughts, a quiet, sharp voice whispered, "It wasn't you. It was never you." But another voice, louder, crueler, cut in, "You should have known. You should have seen it coming." By the time she pulled up in front of Tasha's house, her best friend's porch light casting a warm glow in the darkness, her hands were numb, her body trembling with exhaustion and heartbreak. She barely remembers knocking, barely remembers Tasha's shocked face when the door opened. "Leah? Oh my God, what happened?" Leah collapsed into her arms, sobbing, words tangled and broken. He, she choked on the rest. But Tasha didn't need the details. She just held her, rocking her gently, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe." The next morning, Leah sat on Tasha's couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her hands cradling a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left nothing but the shell. Tasha hovered nearby, her face pale with worry. "You need to eat something," Tasha urged softly. Leah shook her head. "I can't." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Tasha sat down beside her. "Leah, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to hurt you. But I've had a bad feeling for months. The late nights, the weird excuses. I didn't have proof, but—" Leah's stomach twisted. "You knew." Tasha flinched. "Not for sure. And I didn't know how to tell you, without sounding crazy. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. But now—" The words stung more than Leah expected. Betrayal on top of betrayal, like layers she didn't know existed. And then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from an unknown number. "Natalie, we need to talk. You deserve to know the truth." Leah stared at the screen, her heart pounding all over again. The woman in red wasn't done with her. Not yet. Leah didn't reply to Natalie's text. Not then. Instead, She stared at her phone until the screen dimmed, her reflection staring back at her. Swollen eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, the hollow look of someone who'd been cracked open from the inside. She couldn't breathe in that living room anymore. "Tasha," she said suddenly, her voice hoarse. "I need to go. I can't sit here." "Leah, I just need to think," she snapped, sharper than she meant. Tasha flinched, but didn't stop her. She just pressed her car keys into Leah's shaking hands. "At least let me drive you." But Leah was already out the door. The air outside was thick, the sky heavy with a kind of storm that hadn't broken yet. She drove aimlessly, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Every street felt unfamiliar. Every building blurred past, meaningless. And through it all, his voice echoed in her head. "Leah, it's not what you think. You know I'd never do anything to hurt you. I love you. You and the baby. Always." Lies. Every mile she drove, another crack split through the version of her life she thought she had. And then, at a red light, her body betrayed her. A sharp pain twisted through her abdomen. Not enough to send her into full panic, but enough to remind her she wasn't alone. She pulled over, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands, and breathed through the pain until it eased. When it passed, she rested her forehead on the steering wheel, whispering, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." When Leah finally returned to Tasha's, her best friend didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, guided her inside, and wrapped her in the kind of hug that says everything words can't. Hours later, after the storm had rolled in and the rain pounded the windows, Leah finally spoke. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. "Don't," Tasha said firmly. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his choices." But the shame clung to Leah like a second skin. "You should have told me," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. Tasha winced. "I know. And I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you without proof. I thought maybe it was just stress, or maybe I was wrong. I didn't want to hurt you if there was nothing to it." Leah stared down at her hands, silent, because part of her, some quiet, broken part, wondered if she'd been choosing not to see the truth all along. The rest of the night passed in silence. Tasha made her soup she didn't eat. She changed into clean clothes she barely noticed. But when she finally lay down, exhaustion pressing heavy against her eyelids, she whispered one promise to herself. No more pretending. The next morning, Leah woke to a notification ping on her phone, an alert from the shared cloud drive she and James used. For a moment, she almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to look, and what she found broke her all over again. Emails, notes, messages, whole threads of conversations she'd never seen. And not just with Natalie. There were others. Different names, different lies, different promises, all recycled and reshaped to fit whoever he was chasing. Leah sat on the edge of Tasha's guest bed, scrolling, her hands trembling so badly she almost dropped the phone. Her heart pounded as she opened one message after another. To Natalie, "She's checked out, Nat. It's basically over." To someone else, "She doesn't get me the way you do." And most gutting of all, to a name she didn't even recognize. "I can't wait to meet you in person. She'll never know." Leah dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned her. It wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. A web of deceit, so deep she couldn't see the edges. The apartment wasn't just for Natalie. It was his playground, his escape, his secret life. She sat there, numb, staring at nothing until the sun was high in the sky, and her phone buzzed again. "James. James, Leah, please. Talk to me. I made a mistake. But I love you. I love the baby. Please let me fix this." She stared at the message for a long time. Then, with shaking hands, she turned the phone off. The pain started that night. At first, it was dull, just a low ache in her back and stomach. She told herself it was stress, maybe dehydration. But by morning, it had sharpened into something else, tightening and releasing in waves that made her grip the edge of the counter just to stay upright. Tasha found her doubled over in the kitchen, her face pale and slick with sweat. "Oh my God, Leah, we're going to the hospital." "Now." Leah tried to argue, but the look on Tasha's face brooked no discussion. The drive to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and shallow breaths. The triage nurse didn't waste time, rushing her into a room, monitors beeping, voices sharp but calm. Early contractions, the doctor said after a flurry of checks. It could be stress-related. You need rest, less emotional strain, for the baby's sake and yours. Leah stared at the ceiling tiles, tears sliding silently into her hairline. Less stress. As if that were possible when her whole world had just imploded. When they finally let her leave hours later, exhausted and wrung out, Tasha drove her home in silence. In the quiet of the car, Leah placed a hand over her belly. "We're okay," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay." 2 days later, James showed up at Tasha's. He didn't knock once. He pounded on the door like a man possessed, calling her name, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Leah, please, just talk to me." Tasha stood in the hallway, arms crossed, ready to call the police if she had to. But Leah stepped forward, her face calm, her voice like ice. "You have 5 minutes," she said flatly. James blinked, thrown off by her tone. "Leah, please, I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. None of them do. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. Stop," she cut him off, her voice sharp enough to make him flinch. "I don't want your excuses. I don't want your lies. I don't even want your apologies." He looked at her, stunned. "Then what do you want?" Leah stared at him for a long moment, her eyes cold, unreadable. "I want peace," she said finally. "And you don't come with that." And with that, she closed the door. For the first time in days, Leah felt something close to control. Not healing, not forgiveness, but power. It started with a tick-tock. Tasha hadn't meant for it to explode. She just needed to vent, to scream into the void like everyone else did. A 10-second clip. A blurry shot of takeout containers on Leah's counter. A voiceover dripping with venom. When your best friend's baby daddy has 2 girlfriends and still thinks he's the victim. It wasn't supposed to go viral, but it did. By morning, there were thousands of comments. By afternoon, there were hundreds of thousands of likes. By night, Leah's phone was buzzing so much she turned it off. People guessed. People speculated. People pieced things together like amateur detectives. And then came the DMs. Some were kind. Women sending love, encouragement, and strength. But others were confessions. "I think I went out with him once." Was his name James? Drives a black Range Rover. "You're not the only one. He told me he was single. Said he hated drama. He used to text me every night." I had no idea. Leah sat in Tasha's kitchen, scrolling through messages until her hands went numb. Each one was another dagger, another confirmation that the man she thought she knew never existed. By the time she set her phone down, her decision was made. She wasn't going to hide anymore. The message came late at night. From Natalie. "Natalie, we need to talk. Please." I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Leah almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the tone, the desperation, the cracks in the confident facade, made her pause. So she agreed to meet. They met at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. Neutral ground. When Natalie walked in, she looked different. Smaller somehow. No perfect red dress, no sharp edges. Just a woman, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, clutching a latte like it was the only thing keeping her standing. "Leah," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." Leah folded her arms, her guard high. "This isn't a truce. Say what you came to say." Natalie swallowed hard. "I didn't know. Not really. He told me. He told me you two were over. That you were just staying together for the baby. He made it sound like you didn't even love him anymore." Leah's laugh was sharp, bitter. Classic James. Natalie nodded, shame clouding her features. "And when I found out you were pregnant, I confronted him, and he swore the baby wasn't his." Leah's breath caught. "What?" Natalie nodded again, eyes glistening. "I believed him. I wanted to believe him, until I saw the tick-tock and everything made sense." For the first time, Leah saw her not as the other woman, but as another victim. Another woman fooled by the same lies, the same empty promises. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by the same wound. Finally, Leah said, "He lied to both of us." Natalie's lips trembled. "I'm so sorry, Leah, for everything." And in that strange, unexpected way, something in Leah's chest loosened. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but understanding. Labor came fast and hard, weeks before her due date. It started in the middle of the night, a sharp pain that ripped her from sleep, followed by another, and another. By the time Tasha rushed her to the hospital, Leah was barely breathing through the contractions. The hours blurred together, doctors, nurses, beeping machines, the soft hum of voices trying to soothe. And then, finally, a cry. A sharp, beautiful cry that sliced through the chaos and filled the room with something pure. Leah's tears came hard and fast as they placed the tiny bundle in her arms. Her baby. Tiny, perfect, alive. She stared down at the little face, soft cheeks, scrunched nose, tiny fists, and whispered, "Hi, baby. It's just us now. Just you and me." James wasn't there. She hadn't called him, and she didn't regret it. When the nurse asked about the baby's name, Leah didn't hesitate. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." Because that's what this moment was. Not the end. The beginning. James came to the hospital 2 days later. He looked smaller somehow. Less like the man she'd loved and more like the shell of him. "I just want to see her," he said quietly, his eyes darting to the bassinet where Hope slept. Leah stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. "She's mine. She'll always be mine. If you want to be in her life, it'll be on my terms. And you will never, never bring your lies near her." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but the look in her eyes stopped him cold. For the first time, she wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She was done. When he left, Leah closed her eyes and let out a long, shaking breath. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the start of it. Weeks later, Leah sat in her quiet living room, Hope asleep in her arms. The house smelled like baby powder and soft lavender. The chaos of the last few months felt far away, like a storm she'd finally outrun. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Her own video, the one she'd filmed at 2 in the morning, hair a mess, voice shaking but steady, was everywhere. She hadn't planned to post it. But one night, with Hope sleeping beside her, she'd opened the camera and started talking. No warning. No phone. "Just betrayal," she'd said, her voice breaking but strong. But you know what? That betrayal didn't break me. It made me choose me. It made me choose my daughter. And that's the best choice I've ever made. Millions of women watched. Thousands sent messages. Stories poured in, other betrayals, other heartbreaks, other women finding their way out of the wreckage. And for the first time, Leah didn't feel alone. She looked down at Hope, her tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, and smiled. "See, baby," she whispered. "We're going to be just fine." Outside, the world buzzed with her story. Inside, in that quiet little room, Leah finally felt what she'd been craving all along. Peace. Love the story? Don't just watch. Like, subscribe, and be part of the AfroPulse family. Your support keeps the tales alive. See you in the next one.